But today is Palm Sunday. It commemorates when Jesus returned in triumph to Jerusalem riding on a donkey, and the people strew palm fronds across his path in belief that he was fulfilling the prophecy in Zechariah of the coming of Zion's king. By Friday, Jesus had been tried by the Sanhedrin, the Jewish judicial body, found guilty of blasphemy for claiming to be the Son of God, and put to death by crucifixion by the state's Roman governor, Pontius Pilate. It was a clash between the new religious beliefs of Jesus and his followers, and the established church and ruling state. Now, if a clash of beliefs like this happened today, he'd probably be referred to the Prevent program. Would Jesus be labelled an extremist? Well, Andrea, this is the thing. He was a radical. Of that, there is no doubt about it, whoever this man was. And he was about changing the world. So he would have led the fight against the modern-day slave trade. He'd have been the one at the forefront of women's rights and of gay rights, yeah?
I think that the truth about Jesus, I mean, the fact that we're even asking this question, would he be labelled an extremist today, shows where we've shifted in society. But what you just did there, Nicky, in the intro, was give the Easter story. And this is what we remember. He was the man who loved the most extremely ever. He gave his life for every person in this world. That's the story of the gospel, and it's something that we remember on Friday.
And so he would have been at the forefront of changing the world, would be in the forefront of fighting for gay rights? I
think what's fascinating there is that it talks about Jesus as being, in the Bible, as that being the same yesterday, today, and forever. He loved all people, and he spoke to all people, and he says, come to me just as you are. But what he also says for each one of us is that he doesn't leave us where we are. So we see extraordinary examples of Jesus meeting people in their need. So he would heal the sick. He made the deaf people to hear.
Would he be at the forefront of fighting for gay rights?
The blind to see. Well, what I'm going to say here is that let's take one of the examples of Jesus, where he went to a woman who'd been caught in adultery, and those around her were ready to stone her, and he stopped it. And he said, he who is without sin
no more.
To cast the first stone. And he then said to her, sin no more. Go and sin no more. And that's the message of Good Friday and the resurrection.
Would he be at the forefront of fighting for gay rights?
The message would, what he would say.
I'll take that as a no. Linda.
I'd like to finish because what he'd say, to the person is to turn away from all sin. Then you say that's each one of us. All sexual sin, to fight all sexual sin.
Got you.
And to turn to him, because in him is hope and
Linda,
beauty.
Hope, yeah. How unusual was Jesus at the time? How unique was he in that place at that time?
Not as unique as we used to think. So there's been a lot of recent evidence, archaeological, and also the discovery of new scriptures, which show that there were lots of prophets around at that time. It was a time when the Jewish people were under enormous stress. The Roman Empire was controlling the place. There were many apocalyptic preachers, there were many healers, there were many charismatic people envisaging a different way of being, a different kind of society. So there were several people speaking in that way. What's important about Jesus isn't that he was absolutely unique, but the way in which his message has been taken out and developed in certain ways, other ones have been
changed.
That's because that's because of Easter.
Has the message been changed?
No, it was because of Easter. That's the whole of history hangs on Christ. Our calendar hangs on Christ.
The whole of history?
The whole of the history is measured. Our calendar is measured.
All right, yeah.
So it's extraordinary to.
Got you.
Of course, it wasn't like any other. We don't remember the name of any others.
In practice, and I say this as a Christian, an awful lot of Christian teaching about Jesus, and even the way you're speaking, is actually what the heresy is called docetism. It makes him seem like someone who's not really human at all. He's completely unlike us. He's nothing like us. But Christian orthodoxy is actually that he's truly human. That means that he's just like we are. He's a social being, he's a product of his time.
What about progressive politics? Would he have been at the forefront of fighting for women's rights and gay rights? That question. Would he have been trying to change the world today, Linda?
He was incredibly iconoclastic, particularly to the religious authorities of the day. He says, you know, tax collectors and prostitutes are going to go to heaven before you. And he clears out the temple of the money changers. He would have been criticising church authorities today, for sure, for the way that they're behaving.
He'd want women priests.
Well, the child abuse scandal that's coming out even in this country at the moment, and the way that's being covered up, the way women have been treated, I suspect the way that gay people have been treated, yes.
Yeah, revolutionary, Chris.
I certainly hope so.
Yeah.
If Christ isn't an extremist or a revolutionary, then there's no point to Christianity. Christ is, I prefer the term uncompromising to extremist. Christ is utterly uncompromising. He says, love your God, your Father, with all your heart, all your soul, and with all your mind. Not a little bit, not some, all. He says, be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. He doesn't say, like, try your best or, you know, do what you can. He says, be perfect. And then but it's tempered with infinite mercy as well. So when he's asked, how many times should I forgive my brother? He says, 70 times 7, i.e. an infinite number of times forgive your brother, right? So the point is that we are called upon to an uncompromising quest for perfection.
Uncompromising is an interesting word. Let me ask you, while we have time, you know, some of the stuff that is in the Bible with which we are uncomfortable now, many scholars say he must have said that because it, you know, it's survived and it couldn't be made up because we feel a little bit uncomfortable. One of those is when he said, if any man come to me and hate not his father and mother and wife and children and brother and sisters, he cannot be my disciple. So he's saying that God is more important than family. That's pretty revolutionary and makes us feel pretty uncomfortable. And Christ, is God more important than your family?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, absolutely. And in fact, the reason I have a family is because it's been entrusted to me by God. You know, that he is that, without God, there would be no family. God is absolutely the most important thing in the whole of the cosmos. And when Christ was on earth, you know, prior to his crucifixion, what he did.
Who's the extremist, you or Jesus, Chris?
Well, this is my point. You know, it's a question of, as I say, it's a question of being uncompromising.
God's more important than your family.
Of course.
That strengthens the family.
It strengthens the family.
But it's a
of course.
I would say, firstly, I would say God is more important than my family. That doesn't mean that my family is more prone to neglect.
But what if God doesn't exist?
It means that
the jury's out.
It means that if I were to decide, right, I'm actually not that interested in my family, I'm going to abandon my family, because there's a higher authority that I believe is divine that says to me, no, you cannot do that. Therefore, placing God above family actually strengthens my commitment to family.
But it's a weird thing that this man who wasn't married, who didn't have a family, who doesn't preach family values, who says to hate your mother and father, who says leave the dead to bury their dead, has been turned into a religion of authoritarian family values. That's one thing Jesus never said.
The Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul, and to love others.
To love your neighbour as yourself.
Love thy neighbour as thyself, which is and to that call to love, that call to beauty is extraordinary.
Is Jesus more important than your family?
The call to submit. Jesus Christ is the most important reason in my life.
I'm happy.
More important than your family.
He's either. I love him with all my heart and all my mind and all my soul, and I love my family too. So yes, he comes first. But I give my life to him. Yeah. I give my life to my family because he instructs me how to love. He is the source of love. He is the source of love. He is the source of beauty. And this
he's at the core of it. He's at the heart of it.
And as we come
the font from everything comes from
correct.
there.
Correct. And we're remembering Easter. Isn't it amazing? Isn't it amazing that even today, when we're asking this question, next week we're going to Easter. Isn't that and that gives us the question then: is it true or is it not?
You've said that quite a lot, but I think the message is coming through. Cheers, Andrea. Yeah, over there. Hi.
So we've gone off on a few tangents, but I agree with your original assertion that he would be an incredibly assertive figure. Satan in the Gospels that he came to bring a sword, he did not come to bring peace. However, I disagree that he'd be considered an extremist because he doesn't preach violence in any way. He never condemns somebody to death or even torture in this life. Sure, he says you'll burn in the fiery lake of sulphur.
What's the sword for then?
To assertively bring an absolute faith and notion that you should believe in not only him, but obviously what he stands for.
Sheikh Mohammed, the sword thing's interesting, isn't it? Think not that I'm come to send peace on earth, I came to send peace. I came not to send peace, but a sword, that's Matthew. So this idea of a kind of peacenik and hippie in that context is interesting. Clearly from that quote, he could be just as warlike and violent as Muhammad.
No, I think what you have to do is to put the person in the proper context. I think it's very unfair to place a historical figure and then place him into this kind of political nomenclature that we have of extremism, because extremism is a word, I mean, Perkson's got this book about plastic words, these words are bandied about and they don't really have much meaning, and they're created by the ruling class, the political elite, to kind of control specific people on the fringes. And I think from the Islamic perspective, Jesus was perhaps on the fringes. He was there outside the status quo. He was coming in as an outsider.
Anti-establishment.
Anti-establishment. So, yes,
this is a problem for the establishment.
He's a problem, but the thing is, I mean, from an Islamic perspective, he came to rectify the legalism of Judaic theology. So he wasn't really a revolutionary in the sense that I think some people would, in the Christian faith would consider it to be the case. But I think it's an issue of he's Palestinian, he's probably dark-skinned.
Exactly.
I give a lecture on Thursday on jihad in Edinburgh University, and on the train back, I was called a suicide bomber, and I was thinking, I've got a backpack on and I'm dark-skinned, so that's right away. The media narrative is that I'm extremist because of the fact, I didn't know I spoke about jihad, but then that's the way that society tries to kind of put people into pigeonholes so they can deal with them. And it means that you don't have debate about what the person's actually saying. So what was Jesus saying? A lot of people put words into Jesus' mouth that he actually did not say.
This is a very, very good point, because, I mean, Linda, you might pick up here. Some people say it does appear that for some people, they kind of construct the Jesus that they want. You know, he's Che Guevara, he's Robin Hood, he's Martin Luther King, he's a pillar of conservative values. It's kind of make your own Jesus, and the Sheikh makes that very good point about cherry picking and taking what you want.
There's something really fascinating about the way that we know the figure of Jesus, because the information is so limited and it's so two-sided. On the one hand, he preaches peace. Not true. On the other side, there's this tradition of apocalyptic violence in the Book of Revelation.
There's no one in the whole.
Because the Bible is a number of different books that say different things and have internal disagreements, people can make it almost fit what they want. That's part of the power of those scriptures.
There's no one in the whole of antiquity
reinterpreted, and people are still arguing about what it means today, which is where its power lies. But the idea that there is one orthodox interpretation and one Jesus is more about, that's used as a way of that's used as power play. It's not the case.
You've been trying to speak for a long time. A quick word on Jesus. I know that...
Go on. Quickly. I've written a book on the Covenanters, also on John Knox. Now, they were regarded as extremists today, but the Covenanters gave their lives. This book has been very popular. A man called Peter the Prophet. He died exhausted, buried in Cumnock. John Knox died exhausted. His lay prayer was, "Give me Scotland or I die." To them, today, possibly, with many who don't go to church, only 15% go to church in Scotland, Nicky. I'm not saying that proves anything. You put a person in a garage, doesn't make him a car. But the Lord says, if you obey me, love me. If you love me, keep my commandments. The Covenanters had no option but to go in the hills and the moors, give their lives at the grass market. 102 martyrs at the grass market. I've given many talks on them. And these were the heroes of my faith. These are the heritage of my land. John Knox's prayer, "Give me Scotland or I die." That's my heritage of Jesus. Strong but loving. He's strong but loving. He died for my sins.
John Knox spoke of the monstrous regiment of women. He did. But he was talking about ruling women as ruling. I've got to move it on because other people...
Let me finish. Mary of Guise and also in
Lady Queen of Scots.
Medici in France. That was particularly talking. He apologised to Elizabeth many times coming back to the continent and she took the pet.
Can I let some other people in? You've made some really interesting people. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Nicky.
Anyone else? Yeah, go on, Chris.
Well, Linda said that we don't know a lot about Jesus. We know more about Jesus than any other figure in antiquity. We know where he was born.
What do you mean by antiquity?
Well, his era. Right, so say from about 500 BC to 500 AD. We know more about Jesus than any other figure that ever lived in that era. We know way more about Jesus than we know about most Roman emperors.
Is that true,
Absolutely.
Linda?
Historical.
Is that true
As
a theologist and also a historian? Is that true, Linda?
Yeah, we know some things, but we don't even know what he looked like.
The other thing is...
That's interesting. I mean, Sheikh made the very good point. I mean, this is about your own personal Jesus. Sheikh made the very good point about all the medieval portrayals of this blue-eyed, blonde-haired Western Jesus, which was clearly a load of... What's the word I'm looking for? I can't use that one. Sorry. You'll be out if you say that word
It's not like
again.
history. The records of Jesus were written down a very significant time after he had died. They were transmitted orally by various communities. So a lot of variation developed in the pictures of Jesus. That's why there are 4 Gospels, and they all tell a different story.
And do they contradict each other?
They cohere.
They contradict each other.
They contradict one another. Yes. So we have lots of different versions of Jesus and lots of partial points. You couldn't have a Jesus today. Imagine in the world of mass communications, where we know everything about everyone. You couldn't. It wouldn't make any sense.
Would he be on Twitter, like Donald Trump?
You can't imagine it. It's impossible.
We can't imagine it, but
what we can say
but he
is
is
that
known. But he
Go
will
on,
be-
Andrew.
But we can't
So-
imagine it, but
It's
he
the
will
fact
be
we
known.
don't know. We can fill in the gaps, and that's what people do. And then they say, this is the only interpretation, and I've got the truth. And then it starts to become dangerous.
Penny, you wanted to come in. I did beg your pardon. Let me move it over to Penny. Yeah.
So I'm an atheist, so I'm not brilliantly qualified on this question, but it seems to me that he would be seen as a problem today. And the reason he'd be seen as a problem today is because we don't like the idea of placing things above the family. You yourself looked horrified at the idea that we might have ideas that transcend the family. Somehow, if we have big ideas that sit above everything else, that direct our action, our moral decisions, then that's a problem. So I think Christianity would be, and Christ would be seen as a problem if he lived here today, because we're very uncomfortable with people making high-level moral decisions, and that's a problem for us.
Back to the second debate. You very skillfully steered it back there, Penny.
to make a final point.
Yeah, gentleman there. Yeah, white shirt. There we go.
I think that a couple of issues. I think
Very quickly, because we're
sorry.
done.
So if Jesus was a person today, to answer your first question, he probably would have evolved himself to fight for all the things you were asking for, gay rights and everything. But we as humans, we in society, we fail to update ourselves and stick to what was there centuries ago. So I think today, and I don't see any big problem in calling anyone extremist, but I would be interested to know what they're talking about social media. If today we just take away the names, take away the name of Jesus or anybody else, just double blind it, and just talk about what was said, and just spread it on social media and see the reaction, what will come out, that will give us an idea how those things stand today.
Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's the thing, Andrea, isn't it?
And Jesus Christ loved so much. God in heaven sent his only son, Jesus Christ, to die for us. That's an extraordinary gift, complete sacrifice. The most loving man that ever lived for us.
Happy Easter.
And to you.
Thank you all very much indeed. Well, as always, thank you all. There's some really interesting stuff there. The debates continue online and on Twitter. We're not on next week because of Easter. We'll be back on April the 8th from York. For now, it's goodbye from everyone. Have a great Sunday.